Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I wanted to just kind of share my thought process on my deck building and things that have happened throughout my young Yu-Gi-Oh career, and why I think that weaker decks have made me a stronger Yu-Gi-Oh player. And I think to start off, we're using Vanquish specifically because I think I was using Sword Soul back in the day, I think when Vanquish first came out. And I remember thinking, oh, this deck seems weird, and it's fine, but not really that powerful. Little did I know would it become my favorite deck to play. So without further ado, let's just kind of get into this, right? So I've gotten CRs of all of them, because naturally it's my favorite deck now. I don't play it that often, though, competitively, even though it is my favorite, because it's not the greatest. Now, just because I'm saying it's weak doesn't mean it's not good, right? Like, the deck's still fine, it's just not competitive right now, and it's okay to admit that with your favorite deck. So what my point here is, when you're playing a deck that is not relevant to the meta, but you want to bring it into the meta, it forces you to be a better player, and it forces you to think differently. So, for example, in my deck building process, I'm not going to just throw cards in that I think are cool, or like, Ash. I'm not throwing Ash in this deck because I think Ash is a staple. Like, that's not the reason why I'm throwing Ash in. You need to ask yourself, what is the definitive reason for throwing a non-engine piece in? So my reason for Ash is twofold, actually, and Shifter as well, because first thing, you have to understand what your deck wants to do. Vanquish wants to reveal attributes, so obviously I want to put fires, darks, and earths in here generally. So I've covered those bases with Bell, Shifter, and Ash. The second thing is, do these pieces that synergize with your deck affect the meta, or rather your opponent generally? And the answer to that would be, well, yes. Shifter lowers the ceiling of Malice, and it does affect Ryzeal in a way where they can't necessarily make an optimal board with Twinsy Eclipse. Bell affects, obviously this also affects Fiendsmith, and Bell affects Malice and Fiendsmith, and sometimes Ryzeal, depending on how you play it. And then Ash obviously affects everything, but that's just in this case, right? So these are the reasonings and the why behind your choosing these. And then Droll, can't leave out Droll. This doesn't fit the attribute type. However, it is a strong enough non-engine card in itself that it's worth throwing in. It's not because it synergizes. This is more of like meta call. So long story short, your deck choices of cards should be fitting those two criteria, right? Does it synergize with the deck well, for the most part? And second reason is, does it impact your opponent? So with control decks or mid-range decks like this, it's really good practice because every little thing that you do counts. So for example, in this list, I'm not playing Fenrir or Bestials, but I am playing Small World. The reason why I'm playing Small World is because I'm not playing those other monster types. And you can bridge any one of these into Engine, right? Into Ryzen. So if you have Droll, you can activate Small World and bridge Droll into Ash into your starter. If you have Bell, you can bridge Bell into Caesar, because Caesar is an Earth, right? You can bridge Bell into Caesar into Ryzen, because they both have 1500 defense. The other one, Shifter, again, you can bridge it into Borger, which has 15 defense, into Ryzen. And then obviously Ash, normally the bridge for Ash is the Kaiju. I kind of threw it out here, but you get the point. So yeah, like level 3, you can choose the level 3, you can choose the 0 attack and a Droll. I mean, you can search different things. So that's the theory behind Small World and why it is played in this particular build. So as far as affecting your opponent goes, like when you're playing a loaded ground deck like this, you need to really think about your plays and why you're doing them, right? So what actually impacts like directly impacts the meta decks, like Ryzeal? Well, first off, you got Raisin. Raisin is a pop, which can be helpful depending on how you use it. Now, granted, Detonator can just protect itself, so that is an issue. And Mad Love here bounces the monster with the lowest defense on field, right? So what you can do, because 2,000 is generally like the lowest. I forget what Detonator is at. I don't remember if it's at 2,000 or 3,000, but you can bounce most things they have back to hand to like stop them from, making some rank 4 plays. Granted, they essentially have 2 to 3 chances to make rank 4s, which is still pretty good. But again, that's what your non-engine's for, is to stop that. So like you have to think about this affects your opponent, Caesar affects your opponent, Ryzen affects your Ryzeal specifically. This doesn't really, Borger doesn't really, and Zhang doesn't really, right? So you have like 3 cards that really kind of just affect your opponent, and you need to plan for knowing which cards do that, and then using them in unison with your non-engine. And to be particular, I am also playing 3 Imperm, right? Because, that, again, affects the meta directly. And then 2 triple tactics, because, yes, this also does affect the meta. And it's important to understand these, because if you're building a meta deck, but you're just building it based off of someone else's list, or without understanding exactly what it does, then you're not going to do well, because you don't know what it does, right? You need to really understand why certain cards are put into certain decks. That way you know how to use them. It may sound like common knowledge and something very simple, but honestly it goes over, I think, a lot of people's heads when they're just throwing hand traps in because they think it affects somebody, but it doesn't, right? So anyways, that's kind of how I felt like these smaller low to the ground decks have helped me better understand and play Yu-Gi-Oh! In a better way. So like for an example, if I opened, this is just an example, which is like your Ryzen, your starter, right? If I open Ryzen, Tactics, Shifter, and let's just say Ash for like the sake of argument, right? So like, well, okay, so 5 cards, right? Let's just say we have Border. So not a bad hand. We got starters and we have non-engine hand traps, right? This is a pretty good hand. So how, there's also the level of sequencing, which happens a lot in high level play. So like your normal player would look at this hand, maybe go, oh, I'm going to normal summon Vanquish Ryzen and use the effect to search, right? That's like a basic play. And, you'd search, I don't know, something like maybe Caesar. So you'd have the other attribute, right? However, the correct play here is you keep in mind what your opponent has, okay? So right now you see you have Shifter. Shifter is a very, very powerful card. Broken. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten banned yet, but, it's whatever. But Shifter is one of the most powerful cards in the game. And you need to think about sequencing and your opponent, what they could have and what the meta calls for, right? So they could have Valor. Now, Valor hasn't been very popular because the hand traps have been going down lately. But regardless, Shifter, and understanding the rules, Shifter will turn off Valor, because before you normal summon this, you want to activate your Shifter, and activating Shifter will prevent Valor from getting sent to grave to target this to negate it. So all in all, you really need to understand kind of what the cards do and the interactions in order to make the best line possible, right? So knowledge of the game is very important. So if I went Shifter and normal summon this Raisin, the only 2 things that they could use to stop Raisin at this point are Ash and an Imperm. And maybe Purge, Dominus Purge, if they're playing it. But cards essentially that don't need to go to grave to use their effects. So that in mind, let's say we don't get the search off of Caesar because they have ashed it. Well, guess what? They've ashed it. Now we can play into tactics, and now we get to really look over what our options are, right? So tactics is very interesting because you can see we're under shifter, so they're going to be under shifter. We have Raisin on board, and we have a Tactics, right? And we have Borger as well. So along with an Ash. So we're pretty safe next turn. Most decks can't OTK under shifter, and at this point you want to analyze what you have going for you here, right? So you have a Raisin that is your combo starter. You have Borger that really isn't doing much for you right now because you don't have an Earth to reveal and you don't have a Dark to reveal. So it's not really doing much for you. Now you could take a chance and draw 2 and see if you can draw on a more non-engine or whatever, which probably would be the best place since most people aren't playing under shifter. So let's do a quick shuffle and just kind of try to randomize the draw here. And keep in mind that this draw 2 sometimes isn't the best play. Sometimes it's better to just rip the engine out of your opponent's hand and you get to keep playing next turn regardless. But you know, it's totally a call, up to you here. They're gonna have, you wasted 1 hand trap because they've already asked you. So they could have 2 engine and the rip could be kind of useless, right? So your draw 2 would in this case be an Imperm and an Ash. So not awful, but not great, right? So you've got follow up Ash for like the grind game. You got an Imperm you can set, and you're still gonna end up bouncing the Raisin back to your hand for border, right? So what I just did here was I set up something under shifter. You have Ash for the following turn. For the next turn, obviously. You have an Imperm for the next turn. So you're at 2 interruptions, under a floodgate, everything gets banished, and a 2500 beater on the field. So most decks aren't getting over this, especially if you burn these 2, right? And let's say if you do, and they're not able to get over it, then you're drawing for turn into droll, okay? Not bad, but it's not awful because you have a fire attribute in hand, you normal summon, you can go off into your place. So I'm not trying to prove the point of how to play Vanquish correctly. I'm just saying with certain cards that you are given, there's correct ways to play them based on how you built it and what you know will affect your opponent in that given game state. So I hope this helped you guys a little bit. And I know Small World technically isn't in the deck right now, so forgive me. These test hands are a little skewed, but I'm doing my best for you guys and just to give you an insight of how I think about the game right now. And you know, you can apply this to any deck. So like I can do some Mermail stuff, some Dynamorphia stuff, if you guys so be it or so want it. Just let me know in the, oh God, my shuffling's getting real messy. Just let me know in the comments. Okay, so let's see. We've got Durandal, Bell, Rhoda, Raisin, and Prosp. So not awful, not great, but you know, if we were going second, we'd probably like Bell them at a good spot, and if they ended on Detonator plus Cross, we'd probably just scoop because that's hard to play through. But let's say we're going first. If you think about it, what the correct play here is, what do you lose to, right? So you need to ask yourself that. You have a Searcher, a Searcher, a Searcher, a Searcher. So you have 4 Searchers. You're not really worried about Ash. What you are worried about is Droll. So what you should be doing first to bait out the like targeting negation is you should be using your normal summon on the Raisin, right? Because any of this is fine, but in my opinion, they should be used as extenders, because if you're, this can't be used quite yet. You can always just search another copy of Raisin with that. Prosp is like more of an extender, digging to hand traps or whatever you may need. And then Rhoda just searches another one, right? So if you normal summon this and you search out like something and they droll you, then you can't play any of these, right? But if you search something out with these, you can't play anyways, right? You can't even normal summon, use the effect of Raisin. So you're better off just like adding one piece of engine rather than wasting all of these. And obviously there's only so much you can do, but the correct add is Caesar here, because if they drill you, at least you can bounce this and then get protection for next turn. and just, you know, shotgun Caesar, make it unaffected. Not the best, but again, it's droll, right? So what can you do? So let's say they don't drill you though, right? They don't drill you, and you're gonna pop off here, right? Like you're going off. You're gonna go Rhoda. You're gonna add another raisin. You're gonna go Durandal. You're gonna add another raisin, rosin, tomato, right? So you're gonna add 2 more, and you're gonna maintain hand advantage. So you've got 2 earth, 2 fire. Not the like greatest hand in the world, but you'll make do. And then you can prosp. Usually you'll dig for 6 to like search for another interruption. And I mean, really the best option is here is Xiaolong. You could dig for an imperm for another like interruption, but this will get you to your board wipe. So I think Xiaolong is just the correct add here. And then Xiaolong, you reveal his other effect, reveal fire. Special to Xiaolong, reveal your 2 fires. Search for your trap. Snow Devil. And you know, at this point you're only 2 summons in, so you should not be playing into Nib with this deck, right? So like you're just gonna really just pass on this. If you want, or like since you already have 2 Risens in hand, you could just link this off. Up to you, but you can link this off for your rock, and then you just pass here on 3 with like 4 in hand. So there are worse things, and you could just throw Caesar on early to like have an early interruption. So if you wanted to leave Ryzen on and have like 3 Rysens in hand and this on board. Totally up to you, but usually people like to go for the like summon raisin from hand and then you know, pop on their turn. So like you'd want to special this in the same column. You'd go effect. I'm sure those of you who know Vanquish combos already know this. Search for your other attribute, and then you can use this again during your opponent's draw phase. So you don't play any tactics. To search for the 2 raisin. Granted, you do play any tactics when you use this, but you know, it's whatever. I think this is the safer play, to not go this route, to just have Caesar up on board. But you know, this is like a spicier play. And then you want probably another dark in your hand from him. And then obviously you just like do whatever. You can get a column pop with him. And then Snow Devil, like you kind of just wait till they have their level 4s on. And then they're kind of they're immune to detonators effects, right? So you want to just reveal your Earth, Fire, Dark, and then you board wipe, and then you can special any one of them from hand. Usually it would be like Mad Love or something. You search for the Monster Reborn spell trap, then you search this, then you draw one, and then you just maintain hand advantage so much from that point on. So you can just fire off that whenever. But yeah, so that anyways, that's like what I do with the hand, in theory. And playing through hand traps is another thing entirely. That's just depending on what hand you have. So I'll do one more for you guys real quick. If you stayed around this long, I'm sure you're interested in Vanquish Soul. And if not, let me know what you think, and I will do sequencing and whatnot for Mermail at 19. And this is not with Small World either, too. So like some hands we can sort of unbreak. So even this hand's funny, right? This hand is like fine going second because you're limiting their board. You know, for example, I mean it's playable going first, right? So like going first, you'd have to normal your Joel and Lockbird, and then you have to use this effect to equip that. You'd have to search for a raisin. Not the best, right? But then you'd have to use like Stake Your Soul to special something like Xiaolong, and then because it's still not amazing, like you'd have to go, you know, like you'd have to link the Xiaolong off into your rock special this, and you have to do some like janky stuff. But as far as playing through a hand trap, like I said, it depends on your hand. Like this hand is just really really not that great. You're drawing 2 ofs of your 3 ofs, essentially. But, like, going second, like, if you draw them and then you draw for turn into, like, a border, it's not awful. Because this is dark, you can draw things. You know, you want your raisin axis, so I think it's important to bait out an ash if possible. So you probably want to, like, just try to go stake your soul and reveal that. Special out of dark, you know, bounce it, draw 1 into something, and then, you know, there you have a good combo. But yeah, sometimes hands just don't, like, work out in your favor. And that's just Yu-Gi-Oh, right? There's only so much you can do, but that's why deck building is so important. So yeah, that is going to be it from me, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and let me know if you want to see more of these videos. All right, catch you next time.